Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechta Zevachim daf Samach. We are going to begin in the middle of Samach Amud Aleph with the words Omer Rava. So we learned in yesterday's daf, and I may have said it incorrectly in the teretz on Nun Tes Amud Aleph, that Maida Haya Rabbi Yehuda B'Damim, that when it comes to Damim, which means the Zrikas Hadam, not Kedushas Damim, we're talking about Damim. So this has to do with the Kedushas HaRitzpah. When it comes to doing the actual shechting on the floor. So we discussed whether or not a person could do the shechita keneged the side of the Mizbeach, which you could do the shechita on. So Mishnah began a couple of blot ago, saying a machlokas whether you could do the shechita of Kachi Kedoshim, like an oila, anywhere on the Mizbeach, or perhaps only on half of it. So on this, we discussed whether it could be done on the floor. So discussed whether or not there was an element of Kedusha, of sanctification that was placed on the floor itself. And it's based on the drasha of the words of the Kiddush, that it says, "B'yomahu kiddush hamelach toicha chatzer," that he was mekadesh toicha chatzer. Now, what exactly does that mean? So it's possible it means that he was mekadesh the mizbeach atzmai that he was going to build, or it could also be that that's that area. Anyway, and that's what Rashi says. Devarim kiksavim shekidish etz haritz bakul l'shem mizbeach l'haktir lehem. So he was makdish the area itself. Lefisha hayam mizbeach katan mehechel, right? Because there wasn't a lot of space, so therefore he sanctified that area. Okay, and that's actually one of the questions we said. L'haktir l'shem mizbeach, which means there's yesh kedushas ritzpah. Now, even though that's true, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he is moideh, he does agree, when it comes to damim, that even though, let's say, karbanos can be burned on the floor, nonetheless, or shechted, nonetheless, the blood of the karbanos must be sprinkled on the mizbeach, not on the floor. So even though again the question is, because it said ketaris bim kaimai, so he's moida b'damim, that when it comes to the zrikas hadam, it must be on the mizbeach itself. You cannot do zrikas hadam on the floor. Okay, and now we're going to show a proof to this, which we had before, as well as Masechtas Yoma, Omer Rava. Moida Rabbi Yehuda b'damim. As we said, when it comes to the damim, even though Rabbi Yehuda says the karbanos could be burned on the floor, nonetheless, when it comes to the zrika, it must be done mamash on the mizbeach. The side, Rabbi Yehuda Omer kaisechad ha'im mali madam hatoroives. So there was this kos that they would scoop up all of the bloods, v'shavchu al gabi mizbeach, and he would throw it on his back. In other words, why would he do that at the end of the day? Because shimi shafech damo shel achas mehen nims zemach shiroi. So it's possible that the shechita was done properly, the kabbalah was done properly, but as they were transporting the dam, it spilled from the kli sharis. So it was mekadesh in the kli sharis. It wasn't straight from the animal to the ground. That wouldn't be okay. But the zrika didn't take place. So he said, you can take the dam, and ein dam avatal dam, according to Yehuda, and you can scoop up all the blood, and then you can do that. And then that is how you'll be able to be machshir. Okay. Now, if he holds that actually the whole azara, right, even the floor itself, right, even if the floor itself is kodesh, so then ha is avida le mitzvasa. The mitzvah is already done. In other words, what exactly is being accomplished over here? Because the whole purpose he did this is so to be machshir by doing zrika on the mizbeach. But if you could do the zrika just on the floor, so then it was done already. So there's no need to have done what he did. So why did he do it? It must be a raya that it doesn't work. The fact that it lands on the floor is not enough because it doesn't have there's no kedushas haritzba when it comes to the zrikas adam, bedamim. So in this Gemara says v'dilma mishum niksaver shvicha v'koyach adam b'inon. It's actually maybe different because even though maybe there is kedusha on the floor, but that's only if the kohen poured it onto the floor on purpose. Here it happened by accident. So im kain nishkle v'nishvachla duchte. So if that's the case, scoop it up and then dump it back onto the floor. It's like you want to clean the floor, clean your room, you clean it and then you throw it back on the ground. So and the mitzvah in a muvchar is to do it on the mizbech. So it's not necessarily a raya. Okay. Omer Rabbi Lazar. So mizbech shenifgam en oichlin. So as we mentioned before, when it comes to a mizbech which has a pagam, we said that let's say you did shchita on it, it's possible. And then we had a machlokis previously when it comes to if let's say the mizbech was fine and you had an animal which was nire, and then there was a pagam on the mizbech when it now becomes nidcha. If now it also possible, so that's totally in whether or not Bali Chaim nidchin, as we saw. But when it comes to the mizbech, which is nifgam, not only is it an issue of the shchita, but let's say the shchita was done and the zerika, everything was done properly on a shalim mizbech, a complete mizbech, but then afterwards something happened to it. So then, according to this, the din is that at this point, it's you can't eat there. Begine shiri mincha, says Rashi, b'shviloi, for the sake of the shiri mincha. Shenemar v'achu matzos esel hamizbeach. So this pasuk is talking about the shiri mincha, as the whole pasuk says in Vayikra Yud, v'yadaber Moshe el Aharon. So Moshe spoke to Aaron and to Elazar and Itamar, his kids, the ones that were left from Nadab and Avihu who died. Kachu es mincha. Take the mincha hanoisedes, right? The leftover of the flour offering, which is what we're referring to over here, which is the shirei mincha, the leftovers. Okay, you should take that. The ichlu matzois eitzel hamizbeach, and you should eat it eitzel hamizbeach. What does that mean? You're supposed to eat it eitzel hamizbeach. So this is the question. When it says v'achlu matzos eitzel mizbeach v'chi eitzel mizbeach yachluah, we know it's not true. You don't have to eat it mamish eitzel hamizbeach. After all, as Rashi says, "Kol hazarik sher lekach." They can eat it anywhere in the azar. Dechsev b'mincha matzos teachel b'makom kadosh. As long as it's eaten in a makom kadosh, which we define, is referring to the whole azara. So what does it mean, eitzel mizbeach? Obviously, you can eat it anywhere. So elo b'zman shu shalim, it means the eitzel a mizbeach, only can you eat it when there is a complete mizbeach. So Ashkan Shiri Mincha. So now we see that this pasuk is specifically referring to the leftovers of the mincha that it can only be consumed when the mizbech is shalim. So Kachi Kadoshim Anon. How do we know Kachi Kadoshim? So Talmud Omer Kaidish Kadoshim, because the pasuk says Ki Kaidish Kadoshim Hi. And Mamish says it in the pasuk. So we say that this is like a Gzer Shava, as Rashi points out. But the words of the Psukim say, Ki Kaddish Kadoshim. So therefore it must be that it's not just referring to the Shiri Mincha, but any Kachi Kadoshim has the same din. Okay, But now it's more problematic. Kedoshim Kalmanan. So Amar Abaya Asya Midrash Rabbi Yosi Desanya Rabbi Yosi Aimer Gimel Devarim. He actually said three things. Mishum, as we continue to Samach Omid Beis, and take a glimpse at a very short daf coming up tomorrow. Gimel Zekanim in front of by three elders. And this was one of them. Says Rashi, Davar Echa Mepi Kol Zakim Izachet. He heard one of his three things from different Zekanim, and he compiled a list of three. So Rabbi Shmuel Omer Yochel Yal Adam Meiser. Okay, this is one of them. It doesn't really get into what the drasha is, but apparently there is some type of drasha. So Rabbi Shmuel Omer, and maybe we'll get to it. Yochel Yal Adam Meiser Sheni Yerushalayim. A person is allowed to take Meiser Sheni, which of course we know is 10% of your produce on years 1, 2, 4, and 5, and you can bring those fruits to Yerushalayim, v'yachalenu, and you can eat them Bizman Hazeh, nowadays, which of course means Mamish Bizman Hazeh, in a time when there's no Beis HaMikdash. Nonetheless, you can still bring Meiser Sheni. Why? Says Rashi, Diksaver, because he holds Kedushas Aretz lo batla, that the Kedusha of the land hasn't changed. Usricha hafrashas Meisers min Torah, and therefore there's actually a requirement to separate Meiser from the Torah, and therefore you can eat it in Yerushalayim without redeeming it. So v'dinu, and I will show this to you. Bachor, when it comes to the firstborn animal, which that is more technical, that you give to it's a carbon and it's brought to the Beis HaMikdash. That we know is ta'in havas makim. That mamish needs to be brought to a specific place. So meiser ta'in havas makom. So does meiser sheni, because it has to be eaten within the walls of Yerushalayim. Ma b'chor eno elo b'fnei abayis, av meiser eno elo b'fnei abayis. So actually, what this is showing is saying that yachli, you would think that you could do so, but the truth is we don't. Right? Because it has to be only b'fnei abayis, just like b'chor. Yeah, b'al b'chor shechein ta'in matan damim emurim v'gam mizbeach. It's not the same thing, because Bechor has specific requirements. You have to actually do matan damim. You have to do zrikas adam. So, which of course, not when it comes to meiser sheni fruits. So bikurim yochichu. So bikurim will disprove that there's no din bikurim, even though it's also fruit. So there's no matan damim v'emorim. Yeah, but mal bikurim shekein tu'unin hanacha. There is a requirement of hanacha. So maybe that's why you need a mizbeach over there. Talmud Leimer, vehivasam shama oilei seichem egaimer. So the pasuk says, let's get the whole pasuk. Vavesem shama oilei seichem. You'll bring there your olav zivchechem des masor seichem. It says, and you'll bring there an oila, zevach shlamim, meiser, that's trumas yedchem, the nidreichem nidmosechem, uvachayreis bekarchem. And it says also your firstborn cattle and sheep. So makish meisel b'chor. We find a hekish between meiser sheni and b'chor. So what? Because we see them, they're linked in the same pasuk. The mabachor eno el b'fnei abayis, av meiser eno el b'fnei abayis. Okay, but Hadadina, why don't we go back to our original statement, V'nesi b'mahatzad, and you can learn out V'nahadadina v'nesi b'mahatzad. And then apparently you should have again a sad hashava. Mishum ikol mifrach mal sad hashava shemhem shechein yesh behen sad mizbeach. Right. So again, all these things, Bikurim has sad mizbeach, Bechor is sad mizbeach. All these karbonos are sad mizbeach, but meiser sheni is not sad mizbeach. So you can't learn it from a sad hashava. So Mike Summer, what exactly is this person hold? This Tana that he learns out and links Bechor from Meiser. So Iksaver Kedusha Rishon the Kitchel Shait the Kitchel Asad Lavai. The Kedusha was the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Is it still here now? So then, if that's the case, if Il Bechor Nami, then even the din of a Bechor should still apply. Let's go right into Rashi. The question is, do we consider lifnei elokecha or lo? That's the whole question. Do we consider that even though there's no Beis Hamikdash, are we still lifnei Hashem elokecha? So if you tackled yes, then even bechor, says Rashi, afil bechor yakriv yoichel, then you should still be able to makriv it and eat it. Even though it's true, it's a carbon, but since there's kedusha now, so islay shemakriven al b'mishein bias. So the Gemara in Megillah actually tells us that it's shaykh that you could still be makrib a bechor even if there's no Beis Hamikdash there. Ik saver kedusha risheni kitchel hashem kitchel zalavo so afil bechor nami. Ik saver lo kitchel asalavi afil bechor nami. Tiboy. So we should ask the question by bechor. It shouldn't be so simple either. Why are we asking a question? Yochel, you would think when it comes to Meiser Sheni, no, it can't be done. Well, how do we know that? So we should maybe ask the same question by bechor. Like, why would we even have posed the question only by Meiser Sheni? Says Rashi, V'iksav kedushas bias batala. Let's say there's no kedushas bias anymore, but umiboyla b'meiser hoyel ve'enu tzarich bias. And we said, well, we asked the question by Meiser Sheni because there's no requirement of a bias. Mi misachel b'Yerushalayim. So nonetheless, how could it be eaten lifnei Hashem krinin bei olo? Right. So you can still say the same thing. Is that considered lifnei Hashem? So this kind of links to eating, linking to the Mizbech. So whatever requires the Mizbech, also the time of the Echila. So you would think maybe it should be the same question. It says Rashi, let's say you already did everything. You already were makrib the karbanos, the bechor, its blood on the mizbech and its sacrificial parts, and then bechor v'bayis, and then the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, but you haven't eaten the meat yet. Ubasar kayim, so mahu shachluhu. So you could ask the same question by bechor, right? So just remove that part of the avoda. Maybe we're talking about a situation where, again, some of the process has already been done, and all you have left is eating it. So just like Meiser Sheni doesn't need the bias technically, because you bring the fruit and eat there in your shalayim, so you could say the same thing when it comes to bechor. If we're talking about that you did everything during the last moments of the Beis Hamikdash, and now you're with this bechor meat, you don't know what the din is to eat it. So the kedusha here is not now. So then the question is, so how about why by bechor in our case that we framed it? Why is that not a question? As you said, so that's as we established. So the iskish b'sara l'damoy, but the point is, we link the basar to its dam. Ma dama b'mizbeach, a b'sar b'mizbeach. Just like, obviously, the dam must be sprinkled on the mizbeach. So too, when you eat the bechor, it also has to be when there is a mizbeach. And then v'asi meiser comes meiser v'yol b'bechor, and we can learn out from bechor that therefore, just like bechor, you can't eat this meat because there's no mizbeach. So too, when it comes to a bechor. So how can you do this? As we saw previously, you can't have a hekesh to another hekesh. So Meiser Dagan Chulinhu. We say that Meiser Dagan is Chulin. So the whole issue of Davar Laman Mehekesh, Chayzim Laman Hekesh is only by Kachim. However, if it's from Chulin, it's not a problem. So the thing that you're learning too is Chulin. So Hanicham on the Amr Basar Laman Azlina and Alman Amr Basar Mil Laman Azlina Ma'ikam Amar. So Dama Basar Chanamil Sehi. So that's the answer. But again, the question is, so, okay, fine, maybe Meiser Sheni is Chulin, but Bechor is not Chulin, so then how can you learn a Hekesh to another Hekesh? Because the thing you're learning from is Kachim, so the answer is just Dam and Basar is like one thing. Chad Milsahi. And that's the And that's the answer. We're going to actually stop there because the next stop is short. Okay, let's see a couple of questions. Question 5. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kois echad hayimamali medam hatarayves v'shacha al gabi hamizbeach. He poured it on the mizbeach. Amai israch l'zrika al gabi hamizbeach. Rabbi Yehuda savar dechol hazar mekadeshes kamizbeach. So we see from here the raya that he's moide bedamim, that when it comes to blood, it doesn't work. He only said that the floor works el haktir chilavim, only when it comes to the bringing of the sacrificial parts, right? So when it comes to, and I'll just write over here, lahaktir chilavim on the floor. Can be burned. Okay, on the floor. Okay. All right. So that's one answer, and the other answer was no. Lav davka. Maybe it's just mitzvah and muvchar. That's what he says. So the mitzvah and muvchar kaimer. Even though he spilled it, or you could say mekoyach, but then maybe you just lift it up and pour it back down. Okay. Question 6. Kamar iko madiyar mediyov the meiser. The Meiser Sheni, and when it comes to Meiser Sheni, bias, and we learn it from a Hekesh. V'oisim alami nami nilmad behekesh. Mihu hamalamid al Meiser. What do we learn out on Meiser? Mihu hamalamid al hamalamid. Okay. So Meiser Sheni, we make a Hekesh to Basar Bechor. And Basar Bechor, we make Hukish L'damoy. So that's what it is. So Meiser Sheni, we make a Hekesh to Bechor. And Bechor, we make a Hekesh to its Dam. Right? That the Dam, the Basar, right, the Chilas Basar, is Kidam. And it's only when there's a mizbeach. So we said, just like we know that when it comes to the dam, obviously that's the time of the mizbeach. So we make a hekish and say just like the dam has to be mizbeach, so too the achila of the bechor has to be the time of the mizbeach. So and therefore, and from that we make another hekish to Meiser Sheni, that there's no din Meiser Sheni either. Okay, TA 11. So b'yoyim hahu kiddush hamelech taich hachatzer. So my kiddush, as we saw in yesterday's daf, which is only today's, is l'chad mandimer l'haktayus l'shem mizbeach, which means that there's kedushas haritzpa, that the floor itself has kedusha, right? L'haktir chilavim. Okay, so this way I can just like connect everything over here. It's just talking about l'haktir chilavim. And another mandir says it's just l'hamid ba mizbeach. That's just a place the mizbeach will go. Okay, which could mean again is a link to the kedusha of mizbeach. Question TA11: Ish yardim min hashemayim b'mei Moshe matay nistalcha mi'al mizbeach and achayshas. We didn't do this yet. Question TB14. Same thing. No other questions. Adkan.